The Red Komodo, and specifically the Stormtrooper version of the Red Komodo, is a camera I've had for a little bit over a year now. And yes, it's taken me a while to put out this 1-year review just because you may notice the studio's a little bit different. I have had to move in the past few weeks. I ended up moving from where I was in Boca Raton, Florida to Fort Lauderdale, and that was an experience all in itself. But I'm finally moved in the new studio and decided it's time to talk about this camera 1 year later because it is one of the coolest cameras I've ever used, and my motto with using the Red Komodo is it is probably the best 6K 24p camera that has global shutter for under $6,000. And yes, I didn't mention all of the specs. Today we're gonna go over what I think about this camera after using it for over a year. We'll go over the specs obviously because it's not just a 6K 24p camera, but that is my motto today. And I think by the time you get to the end of this video, you'll understand why. So let's get started. So I originally got the Red Komodo in either late July, early August of 2020. So again, a little bit over a year. And I've really enjoyed using the camera, from having the brand new RF mount, to using CFast 2.0 cards, to using generic BP batteries, and the ability to have Wi-Fi and use my iPhone as a monitor when I need it. This camera just blew my mind for a Red camera. Now that isn't to say that the Red Komodo was the best camera for every situation I put it in, and I learned that pretty quickly. But for the most part, if you needed a camera that doesn't have crazy slow-mo ability but has superb image quality, the Red Komodo in every situation I put it through was the camera to use. I shoot mostly documentary, narrative, corporate work, and pretty much everything is in normal speed. I shoot 24p, sometimes I shoot 30p. Red Komodo covers both. The reason I say the Red Komodo isn't the perfect camera for everybody is although the Red Komodo has amazing image quality, especially in 6K, if you need anything in higher resolution that's higher frame rates, the Red Komodo doesn't cover you on that. It goes to 6K 40 frames per second. It does 5K in 48 frames per second, 4K in 60 frames per second, and 2K at 120 frames per second. But I do find that the 2K is a little bit mushy for my taste as far as the image quality. Not to say that's unusable, I just wanted to note compared to the other resolutions and how the footage looks from this camera. The next two items I want to touch on happen to deal with ease of use. Now, the Komodo is an easy to use camera, however, there are some things on it that if you're shooting a lot of run and gun work, it may get in the way of what you're doing. First is black shading or black calibration. It's something that exists on all Red cameras, and on the Komodo when it was released, it was much quicker to do than on prior Red cameras. However, it still could take 5 to 10 minutes to do, and if you're in the field and you're trying to shoot really quickly, and let's say your temperature changes around 10 degrees, you're going from inside to outside or outside to inside, and you need to run that black shade calibration, well, it could eat into the time of filming, and that could create a problem. Not to say that black shading is bad, but it just doesn't exist in all cameras, so if that's something that's going to interfere with your work, it's something to note. The other is autofocus, which I'll touch a little bit more later on in the video, but the Red Komodo does not have tracking autofocus. The autofocus it has is pretty rudimentary, so if you need advanced autofocusing, then the Red Komodo may not be the camera for you either. That's kind of the trade-off you have to do when looking at cameras in this price range. You either want to get something that has the easiest usability but not necessarily the most optimum image quality, although probably not bad. A great example of a camera like that is the Canon C70 or the Sony FX3, FX6. They're fantastic cameras. They have great image quality, but they aren't Red Komodo image quality. It's not to say that the Red Komodo is leaps and bounds above them, but after using the FX3 at work, after using an FX6, after using the C70, I think they're all fantastic cameras, and depending on the type of work you're doing, they may or may not be the best choice for what you are working on. However, they still don't quite fill the void that the Red Komodo has put in my heart when it comes to just filming my passion projects and filming a lot of my corporate work, documentary work, narrative work. A great example is the Star Trek fan film I'm working on, Axonar. We love the footage from this camera so much, we're shooting on Komodos to finish the movie. We originally shot the movie on Red Dragon 6Ks, and I believe we also used an Epic as well. But now we're gonna shoot it all on Komodo because, you know, the image quality is amazing. I also own a Komodo, so it just makes it a perfect choice to use to film that project. I really enjoyed putting the Komodo through its paces on the few short films I shot this year and few commercials I used it for as as well. It really exceeded my expectations every time I used it. There were some shoots I even only used the iPhone to monitor the camera and BP batteries and a small lens, and that pretty much covered me the entire shoot. I do want to touch on the SDI. My SDI has been perfect since I got the camera, although I do follow the order of operations when I do use SDI, as any major gig I've done, I use a proper external monitor. I don't use the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi is great, but it can be spotty in certain situations, so if you need 100% reliability, you have to go through the SDI. I follow the order of operations, haven't had issues, but when I don't have any serious gigs that I want to use the Red Komodo for, pretty much in every one of those situations, I will use the iPhone to monitor the Red Komodo because that RED Control app is fantastic. Now, as far as autofocus, I have used the autofocus, however, I have not relied on it for any kind of work, just because I'm coming from a situation where I pretty much don't use autofocus at all, and I just haven't had to use it in my workflow. So since I don't need it in my workflow, I just continued to not rely on it. But as far as the way it works for a RED camera, it is fantastic if you stay within whatever autofocus box you choose. I did a few videos on it over the past year. I'll link them in the description below. Now, when it comes to the battery and power solutions, the way I decide which kind of power solution I'm going to use is, if I'm going to use the BP955 batteries, it's because I either need the camera to be as small and light as possible, or I'm putting it on a gimbal. Pretty much in every other situation, I'll use some kind of external power source or power adapter, like the Core SWX V-mount adapter that I use. It gives me about 4 hours of battery life with a small 98 watt-hour battery. It's still pretty compact for what it is, and it also powers external accessories if you need it. Not much has changed since I did my first review of the RED Komodo. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but we are in early November. At some point, I do know Jared Land, the CEO and president of RED, did promise that in November of 2021, we would be getting a time-lapse firmware update for the RED Komodo, so I probably will be doing a video on that when I get it, as I've moved to the perfect place to get time lapses. I've loved doing time lapses. I just haven't done them on the RED Komodo just because it chews through a lot of data shooting it at normal speed. When it comes to negatives of the Komodo, other than it not having, crazy high frame rate, the audio preamps aren't the best, but there are workarounds. If you use an external preamp or use something like the newly released Rode Wireless Go 2s or even Comica's new XD Pros, they all do have the option to record the sound internally, and using those kinds of devices have really solved some of my issues with the RED Komodo's audio recording and pretty much negated it for the most part, which was pretty cool, came out just in time. I've had no major issues with the Komodo other than occasionally while I was in the field, if I was rubbing up against the back of the camera and I was putting a lot of force accidentally in moving whether it was the BP955 batteries or even the V-mount up a little bit. I guess at a certain point, if you push it too far up, the Komodo will lose some connectivity to the power and it will force turn off the camera. It typically does save the footage when that happens, and I've only had it happen about 3 times, but it does happen, and most of the time it's been in a situation where I'm in a car and I have the camera up against like my stomach or something, and I'm just kind of holding it tight and I accidentally push up on the power source. It's never really been while I've been filming, but it's kind of been in situations in between filming. But it is worth noting that that has happened, as when I went into the RED Komodo user group, it seems that other users have had that issue, and it seems, it's not going to destroy the camera by any means, but it does happen. So do be aware if you push up on whatever power source you're using, if you're using the back BP955 slot in whatever way, that could happen to you. I will be getting Viltrox's version of their focal reducer for the RF mount, and I can't wait to try that, so that will be in a video coming up soon. So if you have anything you want to see with that focal reducer, make sure to put it in the comments below. If you have any questions about the RED Komodo or my experience using it over the past year that I didn't cover in today's video, make sure to ask in the comments below. And if you got knowledge out of today's video, please make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos on the channel. Thank you for watching, everybody. It's been a crazy few weeks, so I'm glad that I'm settled in. Don't be surprised if you see things around here change up, as I'm really just getting settled into the studio. Have really enjoyed moving into the city, into Fort Lauderdale, because there's a lot of really interesting places to film on the weekend when I have time. So look forward to new interesting content on the channel coming soon. And I'm really excited. I hope you guys are, and I will catch you in the next video.